Good evening. Well, we open the Infinite Way work on a new continent, or rather on another continent. And you know how interesting it is to see how this work has gone from a local work in one city to spread itself over the entire globe except South America. There are a few students in South America, but it cannot ever be a widespread work there. But otherwise it is spreading itself very widely around this hemisphere. It would be an interesting question to ask why this is so. What has made this Infinite Way message spread this way, since it has no organization to do it? It has no big publishing houses, it has no financial background. In fact, it has no finances at all to finance it. It finances itself day by day and provides for its daily needs, and that is all the finances that the Infinite Way has. It has no memberships, it has no contributors, it has nobody that owes it any obligation to support it in any way, shape, manner, or form, and yet, without any form of organization, without any form of promotion, advertising, all of this has happened, and so we have the right to say what has brought it about. When The Infinite Way, that is the book The Infinite Way, was written, I thought of it as bringing about my retirement from active work. I thought, and I actually prepared, to live in a little bungalow in California and to go to an office every day where I was going to do a little healing work, and then go to the desert every Friday afternoon and stay there quietly, coming back perhaps Monday. And this is the way I visualized my life after the book The Infinite Way was written and published. And instead of that, this has happened, that whereas I had never expected to teach, people began coming to me and asking for teaching. And whereas I had never lectured, I was invited here and there to lecture, not only in our own city, but in other cities, and so began this work. As I have watched it unfold, my observation is this: there is something about the Infinite Way that is unique, that is, in our age and in our Western world. And that is this: it encourages us to bring God into our experience as an experience. It does not encourage us to talk about God, or to preach God, or to write about God. But almost every page of the writings, almost every tape, is an invitation to experience God. There is, first of all, the revelation that God is an experience, and that God is an experience that we can achieve. Strangely enough, it does not start out by saying that there is a God or trying to prove it. The Infinite Way is really not a message for anybody that doesn't already know that there is a God and isn't already convinced of the availability of God. I think that is one of what you might call its weaknesses, that it doesn't provide for instruction to beginners or people who have to have God proven to them. It starts out as a teaching only for those who are already convinced of God, and more than convinced of God, convinced of the availability of God in our individual experience, even if they have not yet achieved the realization. In presenting this idea, it has evolved that it is necessary that the Infinite Way be understood as having two parts. One, the letter of truth, and second, the spirit or consciousness of truth. The letter of truth is only valuable in one way and for one purpose, and that is as it may lead to the God experience or to the Christ experience. In and of itself, the letter of truth does not heal anybody or reform anybody or correct or enrich anybody. The letter of truth is used only as a stepping stone, as a preparatory step to that which does change our experience. I will illustrate that. An Infinite Way treatment whether we are treating now along the lines of health supply, family peace, national peace, or international, capital and labor peace, whatever the subject of our treatment may be, we will divide it into two parts. The first, which is the letter of truth, of which we really expect nothing in the way of results. We expect it only to lift us into an atmosphere where we can be ready for the second part of the treatment, which is receiving within us the Word of God, receiving within us the Word of God, which really does the work. Our principal point is that it is the Word of God that is quick and sharp and powerful, not the word of man, not the treatment that man gives, not the thoughts that a man thinks or a woman. It has nothing to do with any truth that you or I may know intellectually. It is the Word of God which really performs the miracles of changing lives from sickness to health, or from poverty to sufficiency, or from unhappiness to happiness, or from incompleteness to completeness. So that in one way or another we must prepare ourselves so that we can receive that word which is uttered within us. He uttereth his voice, the earth melteth. When we receive an impartation within, which we recognize as the Spirit of God uttering or expressing itself, the Spirit of God declaring itself, the Spirit of God revealing itself, when we receive that within, then we may expect miracles without. Without this, we are as tinkling cymbals. We are clouds without rain. We are just nothingness. So all of the letter of truth will only lead us to a state of receptivity in which we receive the Spirit of God in one way or another. Our letter of truth differs from that of any metaphysical presentation that there is in the world at the present time, completely so, because our treatment is never, and remember that I say never, never given to a patient, never given to a person. We never, under any circumstance, treat anybody. We do not even treat animals. We treat only ourselves. We never declare a treatment in the form of you are spiritual, or you are perfect, or he is, or she is, or it is. Never, never, under any circumstances. A prayer or treatment takes place within ourselves and is never projected thought into the consciousness of anybody, at any time, under any circumstances. This is important. This is very important. We never address a treatment to any person. We never name any name. We never take the name of a disease or a condition into our treatment. Never. Our treatment takes this form. We will assume for the moment that you have asked me for help and that you have said that you have a physical claim. Remember, I do not know your name, and I'm not going to ask you your name. I do not know the nature of your claim, and I'm not going to ask it. Please remember that, because that is the position you must assume in this work. If you receive a telegram saying, "Give me help," and there is no name signed, that does not concern you one bit. And that did happen this week from New Zealand, a cablegram just saying help. If you should receive a telephone call and do not recognize the voice, and it just says, "I want help," it makes no difference to you who it is or whether the help they want is physical, moral, mental, or financial. All that has nothing to do with you. Why? Because you are not going to treat them, and you're not going to treat them for anything. You are going to start in this wise. The first word that you will speak or think is the word God. And you will never change that treatment. God is. And this is not a formula. So even when you hear it again on a tape or read it, do not try to use this as a formula, because all treatments must be spontaneous. The treatment that may have saved someone from death yesterday might prove worthless today, even with a little cold, because we do not live on yesterday's manna. We do not use yesterday's treatments. We do not think of yesterday's thoughts. Every time a call is made upon us, our answer must be spontaneous. In other words, it must be original. It must be something that hasn't come to us before, unless in a different way. And so we will start with the word God. And you will now see that I am treating myself on the subject of God, which means I am knowing the truth. But I am not knowing the truth about you or your claim. There isn't any truth about you or your claim. There is only a truth about God. What is the truth about God? God is infinite. God is omnipresence. God is omnipotence. God is omniscience. God is the only life of individual being. There is no other life but God, therefore there is no such thing as a you. There is only God expressing its own self infinitely, individually, exclusively, and God is the life of individual being. Therefore God is all life, and God is the life of all. Yes, error sometimes claims to have a law, doesn't it? Like the law of infection or the law of contagion or the law of heredity. But God is the only law. And God is the only lawgiver. Therefore all law is spiritual. There are no mental laws with power. There are no material laws with power. God is spirit. Law is spiritual. Therefore there can be no law of sin, no law of disease, no law of lack, no law of limitation. There just cannot be such a thing. Of course, if you read the papers, this isn't true, because there are medical laws, there are laws of economics, there are laws of human relationships, there are laws of matter, there are even mental laws. But according to this, our letter of truth, these aren't laws at all, they are beliefs. They are superstitions. They are forms of ignorance. Somebody entertains a belief that there is such a law, a claim that there is such a law, but actually there isn't. Since God is infinite, and since God is the only lawgiver, God must be the only law. Therefore, the only law operating in consciousness is spiritual law. Here we come to another thing. All of these errors of human experience claim to be power. Something claims that it can destroy life. Something else claims that it can destroy body. Something else claims that it can destroy sanity. Now, what is the truth? Well, the truth is God. God is the only being. God is infinite. God is the only power. Therefore, there is no power in any effect. So whether you are dealing with germs, or whether you are dealing with bombs, or whether you are dealing with brains, the answer must always be the same. There is only one power, and that power is spiritual. Here I must bring to your attention a very important teaching in the message of the infinite way. We do not have God as a power over error, nor do we have truth over error, nor do we have God power over something else. In the infinite way, we do not use truth to overcome error. We do not use God or even pray to God to overcome evil. We do not even think of God as a power that can overcome evil. Our concept of God is as infinite being, infinite power, infinite presence. And therefore there exists no other power upon which God could operate. This is important. because otherwise you are a house divided against yourself. If you believe that God is a power that will do something to some other power, you are setting up a second power, and thereby you are going to maintain and sustain that power within yourself, whereas otherwise it has no existence. The infinite way rests squarely on this principle that we do not overcome sin or disease or lack or limitation, that we realize the infinite nature of God and let these illusory beliefs disappear of their own nothingness. In other words, 2 times 2 being 4 does not operate to destroy 2 times 2 is 5, because 2 times 2 are not 5. Therefore, they do not have to be destroyed. Nor does 2 times 2 is 4 have to do anything to 2 times 2 is 5, because there is no 2 times 2 is 5. So when you recognize 2 times 2 is 4, the belief that 2 times 2 is 5 no longer comes into your consciousness. When you have accepted God as an infinity of omnipresence, then all of these 2 times 2 are 5s do not come into your experience, and those that are presenting themselves to you are automatically nullified, not because God is doing something to them, but because nothing can exist in the presence of truth but truth itself. In thy presence is fulfillment. When Christopher Columbus sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, he did not change a flat universe into a round one. He merely demonstrated that the world is not flat, it is round. When we have what is called a healing, we haven't really healed sin or disease or lack at all. We merely proved that it had no existence. Do you see that? That is why we cannot give testimonies. The only time we can ever give a testimony is to show forth a principle that revealed the nothingness of that which appeared in someone's thought as a power or presence apart from God. We can never say the infinite way heals disease or heals sin. We never can say that, because the infinite way is a revelation that disease and sin have no presence, no power, no law. They are just nothingness, the arm of flesh. Therefore, you cannot take credit when they disappear. It is very much like the disciples coming to the Master and saying, even the devils are subject unto us through thy name, and getting a well-merited rebuke. Do not say that. It isn't true. There are no devils subject unto you in my name. The truth is, your names are written in heaven. Just rejoice at that. So it is with us. Just rejoice that you are having revealed to you that God constitutes your being. That is all. You have no power over error. God has no power over error, because there is no error aside from what we erroneously assume. You would rejoice if you could witness the different ways in which human relationships have come up for what we call healing, where some individual or some organization or some evil state of thought claimed to have power, and then just all of a sudden faded out like the nothingness that it really is. When faced with the realization of one presence, one law, not 2, this is a revelation of the infinite nature of God appearing as individual you and me. God constitutes your being and mine. Therefore, there is nothing in or of or about your being except that which is in or about God's being, for there are not 2 beings, but one. God is being me, or God is being you. The life of God is your life. The mind of God is your mind. The soul of God is your soul. The Spirit of God is your spirit. And know ye not, even your body is the temple of the living God? So there could not possibly be an erroneous condition present. There could not possibly be a mortal or material law operating in you or upon you or through you. Watch this. The infinite way tells you that there are no laws operating upon you either for good or for evil, that there are no benefits that can accrue to you from any place, and that there are no discords that can come to you from any place, because one life, one law, and I am that. And it does not come to you, it flows out from you. And right here I'm going to give you a new passage in this lesson, because on top of this lesson that we are hearing on oneness, it will help you to remember that to the illumined consciousness, darkness and light are one. You do not overcome darkness with light. Darkness has no existence as an entity. And whereas the unillumined consciousness always must take up the sword against something or somebody, it must resist evil in something or somebody, to the illumined consciousness, according to Scripture, darkness and light are one. And remembering this will help you to settle into your meditation and stop the effort at trying to make darkness disappear and light appear. In other words, I am the way, the truth, the life. I am the law, and therefore it all flows out from us, never acts upon us. What we are suffering from when we suffer is the universal belief that we are human beings, and that there are good laws which can operate upon us from God, and evil laws which can operate on us from the world, and neither of these things is true. There is no God separate and apart from your own being. I and the Father are one. Thou seest me, thou seest the Father that sent me. Therefore the Father at the center of your being is expressing itself as the harmony of this universe. It is flowing out from you, not flowing to you. You will see how this operates as we come to the subject of supply. I do not have to tell you that there are metaphysical movements all over the world teaching how to demonstrate supply, when demonstrating supply is a fantastic impossibility. Nobody has ever succeeded in doing it yet. That is one reason so much of the New Thought movement has shrunk. That is why it is only, well, at least it is smaller than it was. Because they are still trying to do an impossible thing. They are trying to demonstrate supply, and it cannot be done. No one in all of this world can get supply. It is an impossibility. And those who are trying are just making themselves sick and weary in the attempt. And the reason is this: the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and the kingdom of God is within you. Therefore, all the supply in this world is within you, and it has to flow out from you. It cannot come to you. You have to open out a way for the imprisoned splendor to escape, rather than to make entry for some supply that somebody says is out here. Communism is based on the belief that there is so much supply in all of this world, and there are so many people who have to divide it up. But not spiritual truth. Spiritual truth says that we multiply supply as we need it. We can have an infinity of it if we will follow the formula laid down by spiritual teaching. And the formula is this: what have you in your house? You say, me? Oh, I was going to get it somewhere else. I was going to demonstrate it from somewhere. No. The Hebrew master says, what have you in your house? Oh, a few drops of oil. Well, that is enough. Begin pouring. Then you see what happens? The cruse of oil never runs dry. The Master, Christ Jesus, follows the same formula. They say to him, the multitudes are waiting to be fed, and he says, what have you? A few loaves and fishes. Well, then begin. Begin to break. Break them up and divide them. Let them flow out. And he never stopped breaking until all were fed, and there were 12 baskets full left over. If you want to demonstrate supply, you have got to begin with what have I in the house. And then you have got to begin to share it. It may be dollars, it may be pounds, it may be shillings. But it may not be. There was Mr. Rickenbacker who was out in the middle of the Pacific and who had a great big checkbook with him, but it was no good to him. They didn't have any banks out in the middle of the Pacific to cash them. They had no supermarkets either. So he couldn't begin to give out money. He had to give out something else. And what did he give out? He just sat there realizing, I and the Father are one. All that the Father hath is mine. And as he expressed that truth, the supply began to unfold in the form of rain from a cloudless sky and birds sitting on its head to be eaten, and every day fish jumped up out of the water. For 3 weeks, every day fresh fish jumped up out of the water into the boat to be eaten. That was because he did not try to demonstrate supply. He sat quietly with his arms folded, and like Burroughs in his poem, and my own shall come to me. Omnipresence. Do you see that? The omnipresence of good. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, and it is omnipresence, where I am, not something to be added to us, but the recognition of omnipresence. So it is with us. You cannot demonstrate health. Health cannot come to you, not even from God. Health is already established within your own consciousness, and all you can do is express it. It is very much like this. Let us say integrity. Where would you go to get integrity? Could you go any place to get it? Could you borrow some of your neighbors? No, integrity is a quality which you have, and you have it infinitely. Even if at any given moment you may not be expressing it all, you do realize that you have it. And at any moment you can express the fullness of integrity without going out and borrowing any from your neighbor. As a matter of fact, you know the utter impossibility of getting integrity anywhere but within your own self. And how about benevolence? You have that within your own self. It is up to you and to me to express it. But we have it. We have loyalty. You cannot go out and get loyalty any place. Loyalty is a quality within you. It is up to you whether or not you are expressing it in its fullness. But there is no use in crying or in sitting down and saying, oh God, send me some more loyalty or integrity or fidelity or charitableness. You are not going to get them. You already have them, and you have got to bring them into expression. Health is just as spiritual as integrity, fidelity, or loyalty, or charitableness. Supply is just as spiritual as any of those. Therefore, they already exist within your own being. What I am trying to tell you is this. Since God constitutes your being, infinity is the measure of your being. You already possess infinity. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. Isn't that a good formula? Isn't that a good treatment? Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. What other truth do we need beyond that? Just the constant living in that remembrance. All that the Father hath is mine. And that means all of the integrity, all of the fidelity and charitableness and forgiveness, all of the love, all of the supply, all of the grace of God, all of this. Why is this true? Because I and the Father are one. Son, thou art ever with me. Do you see, I of my own self have nothing and am nothing? But by virtue of my sonship I am all. By God's grace I can heal the multitudes, feed the multitudes, supply the multitudes, teach the multitudes. I can meet any demand that is made upon me. Why? By the grace of God, which is the measure of my capacity. I have no capacity less than God. I may not be able to demonstrate all that at any given moment, but I have it, and it is to be demonstrated in proportion as I am willing to pour the one drop of oil that I have at this moment, or the one drop of understanding. So you will see that you really could start to practice healing work today or tomorrow because you will never be any better prepared 1,000 years from now than you are now. All you have to do is take whatever grain of truth you have learned tonight and keep on putting it into practice, and watch how it multiplies itself as you use it. If you never had a lesson after tonight, you would still have enough for the rest of your life, because all you would have to do is to begin to treat in the manner that I am showing you here tonight, and you would watch the rest of it unfold and multiply from within yourself. This lesson was given in 1956, and I say to you now in 1963 that it is just as true now. This would go on and on and on, and you would find that this treatment is an endless one. And it could go on for 100 years, and every day be fresh, and every day be able to meet any demand made upon you. But you would have to use this that I'm giving you tonight as your starter, and from that basis let the rest unfold from within you. Start with the word God. Realize God as infinity. But if God is infinity, then remember God is infinite good, and so we have no evil. You cannot have an infinity of good and some evil too. Therefore you cannot use God or truth to overcome anything, to destroy anything, or rise above anything. You can only know the truth. You can only abide in the realization of God's infinite nature as your individual being now. Never make the mistake of declaring all this truth about God without realizing simultaneously that it is the truth about you, because God and I are one. As you treat along this line of recognizing God to be infinite omnipresence, God to be the only being, God to be the only law, God to be the only life, God to be the only substance, God to be the only cause, God to be the only effect, you will gradually find something beginning to well up in you, and the first thing would come to you is, my heavens, that's complete. And then you would find that the first half of your treatment is over, and you have prepared yourself for the second half. And incidentally, haven't you forgotten all about your patient and their claim by now? I'm sure you haven't thought of that for the last 10 minutes. And yet all of the time you've been treating. Now the second half of your treatment. There are no words and there are no thoughts. And for the second half of your treatment, you take the attitude of the boy Samuel, speak, Lord, thy servant heareth. I will listen for thy voice, from Mrs. Eddy's hymn. It doesn't make any difference in which way you approach God as a state of receptivity, as much as to say, here I am, Lord, reveal thyself, speak to me. Or in the words of Jesus, I can of my own self do nothing, the Father within me doeth the works. All right, here I am, Father. And you maintain that listening attitude for as many minutes as you can without mental strain. 2, 3, 4, 5. And whether or not this happens the first time, it will eventually happen that you will receive an answering response within you that will give you the assurance that God is on the field. It may come in the form of a deep breath. It may come in the form of an inner feeling of release or an inner feeling of peace. But there will be an inner assurance that all is well. And then your treatment is through. The first half has been to lift you up to the place where you could be receptive to the voice of God, to the presence, the power of God. And then in those few moments of silence, that presence will announce itself to you, and the treatment is complete. You might want to know if in every case the patient is instantaneously healed. Not at all. Not at all. In some cases you may have to give a second or a 30-second treatment. And in some cases you may have to do it all over for a year or 2 or 3. And there are reasons why everyone does not respond instantly to this work. First of all, the major responsibility is with the practitioner. That is, the practitioner must rise high enough to be receptive to this voice of God, this presence of God, and actually be the outlet, the instrument, through which the presence of God can flow. So the major responsibility is with the practitioner up to that point. As to whether the healing takes place instantly or whether it is slow, or whether it takes a long, long time, depends on a dozen different circumstances. Number one, Most of those who come to us for spiritual healing do not really want spiritual healing. What they want is a physical healing through the Spirit. And they are not a bit interested in the Spirit itself. And they block their own healing thereby. That is like the Master telling the Hebrews, I fed you yesterday. What are you here for today? Oh, they're hungry again. Aha, what you want is the loaves and fishes then, not the principle that I tried to give you yesterday. I tried to give you the principle, but you weren't interested. You were interested only in being fed. So you'll find that most of the people who come to us, especially when they first come to us, have no idea of really wanting God. They might say so. They might even believe it, but it isn't true. The minute they get their healing, they're running off to their bridge game or their dancing or whatever it may be. And God goes all the way back into their memory until the next sickness comes around. And then we run and get the book out again or call the practitioner again, and then God goes right back again upon the bookshelf. Most people are using God for some personal reason or attempting to, and God just does not respond that way. It doesn't happen that way. God is a jealous God. And you'll find that where your best healings take place, and the quickest, are really where individuals finally do come to the realization, well, I guess I want God more than I want the healing. Then you find that healings take place rapidly. The very desire for a healing blocks the healing, because the desire for a healing is a declaration that, God, something has gone wrong with you, and you have let me get sick, and now I'm coming to you to have you patch up your work. And you see, there is no truth in that state of thought at all. Actually, there is no such thing as sin or disease in any of us, not a trace of it, or on anybody else on the globe, regardless of appearances. And when we realize that, these appearances have a way of disappearing. But it is while we are holding in thought that we have someone who needs correcting or improving. Have you never heard the practitioner say, now you must be more loving, or you must read so many more pages of the book every day, or you must do that, or you must do that, all predicated on the belief that there is something to be done to somebody? Or, oh, if you were only more grateful, oh, if you were only more, well, it has got nothing to do with that at all. Healing is not dependent on something except the realization that there is nothing and nobody to be healed. Since there is only one being, and that being is God, there is no you. There is no you in the way that you are thinking of yourself. There is no you, there is no he, there is no she. There is only God infinitely multiplied on the face of the earth. There is only God infinitely expressing itself as you and as me. As long as you and I want to hold a belief about each other as being human, as being old or young, or as having these virtues or these vices, just so long will error perpetuate itself in our experience and in the experience of our patients and students. It is only in proportion as the teacher can sit here or stand on the platform and realize God as individual being that the healings take place. But once the practitioner looks out and says, oh, but you're not loving, or you're not grateful, or you're too sensual, or you haven't attended church, or you haven't read enough, there is no healing in that consciousness. Do you see that? To the practitioner there must be no you. Then as the practitioner stands fast in the realization there is only God, there is only the law of God in operation, there is only the life of God in being, there is only the substance of God made manifest, then the patient or student, if they are receptive and responsive, will have a change of consciousness. Then the change of consciousness that they have appears as outward healing. And that is why we sometimes fail. We are trying to bring about a physical change, or the patient is. As long as we are doing that, we are not spiritual healers. We are just materia medica at a different level. Instead of using medicines, we are using mind, or trying to use God. But it is still just trying to be materia medica. But spiritual healing is based on the realization of God as individual being. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. And here, please remember, when the Master says, I forgive thee, or thy sins are forgiven thee, but go and sin no more, he is saying to us that consciousness must externalize itself. And so even though in our desire for healing we have temporarily purified ourselves, turned to the Christ to let it purify us, yet if we go right back to our material way of thinking, or if we go back to our old habits of thought, remember we're going back to the old externalization. It is for this reason that in working with our patients and students, we must always keep uppermost in mind that without a change of consciousness, there is no change of body. Without a change of consciousness, there is no change of pocketbook. Without a change of consciousness, there is no change of morals. In our lives, physical, mental, moral, and financial, we are externalizing our own state of consciousness. And if our consciousness should be improved by our studies and meditations, the outer experience of life must be the exact reflection or expression of our higher state of consciousness. As we realize this truth about ourselves and about others, we are loving our neighbor as ourselves. But you have to start with the infinite nature of individual being. You cannot start with a human being that has to be patched up, either with supply or with health, or with morals. You must start in your own thought with the realization that God constitutes individual he, she, and it. And this is equally true, remember, of the animal world and the vegetable world and the mineral world. God constitutes the life of the flowers in the garden. God constitutes the life of the vegetables and the fruits. God constitutes the life of the cats and the dogs and the mice and the lions and the bears and the tigers. And when we realize this, we are maintaining, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And there is the only truth there is. God is the only truth. God is infinite, therefore God is the truth about you, and God is the truth about me. You have no capacity separate and apart from God, therefore your capacity is infinite. Jesus said, why callest thou me good? There is but one good, the Father in heaven. Therefore you cannot even claim good qualities. You cannot even claim that you are spiritual. You cannot even claim that you are benevolent. You cannot even claim that you are virtuous. That is all nonsense. God alone is this, and God expresses these qualities as individual, you and me, and every individual on the face of the globe, including all of the men in prison. They too have this fullness of God's virtue. They're not expressing it at any given moment, but they will express it in proportion as you recognize it in them as omnipresence. They cannot be reformed by ministers, priests, or rabbis. Why? Because the minister, priest, and rabbi goes there and says, you are a sinner and I'm going to make you good. He isn't going to do any such thing, and that is why he can't succeed. That is why we need more prisons every year, because they cannot succeed in taking a sinner and in making him better than he is. But we can succeed, and we do succeed. But we do it by recognizing that God constitutes this being. And you see what happens? I suppose I should use the word love here. It is very easy to be popular. And I said this to a class in New York recently, that whereas Dale Carnegie gives a whole course in how to be popular, we can learn it in 5 minutes. I can tell you the secret of how to be popular in 5 minutes. So popular that you won't know what to do about all the good invitations that will come to you. And the way is this, only never swerve from it. God constitutes the life and soul of individual beings. And so wherever you go, wherever you move, whether you are shopping or marketing or in business, or wherever you are, no matter who you look at, just realize God constitutes you. You will be surprised how quickly that somebody will look up at you and love you. And the next thing you know, they'll be inviting you out. And you will know how it happened. It is because they can feel what you feel toward them. They can feel that. They can feel when you're criticizing, judging, condemning. Probably they can't read your mind, but they just veer away from you. They just do not have a feeling of liking towards you, because they can sense what is going on, and we can all sense it. So that it doesn't do any good to say this is a good person or this is a sweet person, that they do not feel. But when you begin to behold them spiritually, when you begin to realize the spiritual nature of their being, that is when they look up and begin to be attracted to you. And please remember that you never have to voice one single word of this or let anyone know what you're doing or thinking. What God seeth in secret is rewarded openly. We had a noon group once in Portland, Oregon, and we performed a 5-day experiment there. This was a group of business people who came in at 5 minutes past 12 every day, and we had a 15-minute period at this Truth Center. I was giving classes there, and so the leader had asked me to inaugurate this for business people so that they could continue it afterwards, and we did. And in working out our program, it came to me in this wise, to say to these business people, let us use these 5 days that are at our disposal for an experiment. I will tell you what truth is true. I will tell you of an experiment that you can try and see what happens with it. And begin the very minute that you leave this room. In other words, the minute you go out of that elevator, begin it right there, and then keep on through this week. As you leave this room, remember this. God sits behind the eyes of every individual in the world. Christ is enthroned in the heart and soul of every individual. Therefore, wherever you go, whoever you meet, look them right in the eye and remember to yourself, just think, Christ sits enthroned. Christ is the reality of that being. Divine sonship is their relationship with God. And let us see what happens during this week. Well, I will tell you one of the first things that happened. Whereas we had been having this Truth Center in this building for several years, and neither the superintendent of the building nor the operator of the elevator ever came to a meeting, that night both were there. They took turns coming in and going out. And from that time on, they have never missed a meeting there. They always take turns coming in while the work is going on. They responded instantly. Then others reported that salespeople in stores came up to them and told them of special bargains that there were on that day. Or somebody came over to them and waited on them, almost out of turn, it would seem. Anyhow, we had a whole series of experiences that took place there that showed that people responded to the truth. They responded to the truth that you knew about them, but it had to be a spiritual truth, not a human truth. And so it is, the way to be popular is to absolutely live in the realization that Christ is man's true identity. And then every time you see an individual, know that truth about them, even if you have to look them right in the eye to do it or look just behind their ear. But in some way, realize specifically, here is the Christ child. Here is the Son of God. Here is God enthroned in human consciousness, and you watch the miracle. Imagine what this would do for salespeople in any line of work. And this is the secret of healing work. The secret of healing work is realizing God, that is all. Realizing God. Realizing that God constitutes our being. Realizing that God is the only law unto our being. Realizing that God is the only life, the only soul, the only spirit. realizing that we have no qualities or quantities except that which is of God. God is the infinity of our capacity. And, please remember, to the illumined consciousness, darkness and light is one. There should never be any question in your mind when your eyes are closed as to what you should do or what you should think or what you should declare, because you are not there to do anything to anybody or to anything. The function that you are performing is to know that to the illumined consciousness, darkness and light is one. And stop resisting evil. Put up thy sword. I said last night that probably only Jesus Christ was able to show forth the fullness of this measure of God's infinity. But all of us can show it forth in some measure. And the measure is determined by our own devotion. How much of our day are we willing to consciously know this truth about God and God's infinite individuality? How much of the day are we willing to keep our thoughts stayed on God? How much of the day are we willing to acknowledge Him in all our ways? How much of the day are we willing to put up our sword? How much of the day are we willing to pause for a moment to realize that God is and we don't need any more of God than we already have? That is what really constitutes the measure of our capacity. The more we pour, the more we'll pour through. But the moment we stop pouring, we dam up that which must flow out from us. Always remember this: no good can come to you, not even from God. Since I and the Father are one, all good must flow out from you. You can really take that poem of Browning's as a treatment. We must open out a way for the imprisoned splendor to escape. Whatever it is we think we need, that we must open out a way for it to escape from within us. That is why there are people who, when they sometimes feel a sense of lack, will go out and spend a little more than they can afford, just to break the mesmeric sense of lack. And that actually is the spiritual principle. Cast your bread upon the waters. Break this mesmeric sense which says that you are limited, that says you are finite. And there is no way to break that sense except by letting something flow out from you. I knew a practitioner in New York one time who every time there was a tightening up of her finances would go out and buy a new hat. And I'm sure the milliners would love to have engaged her for advertising purposes. It doesn't always have to be money. In the 25th chapter of Matthew, the Master reminds us that when I was sick, ye visited me, comforted me. When I was in prison, ye visited me. When I was naked, ye clothed me. When I was hungry, ye fed me. O Master, when saw we thee in prison and visited thee? When saw we thee sick and comforted thee? When saw we thee naked and clothed thee? When saw we thee and hungered and fed thee? Inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. And so it is that sometimes, in order to break the mesmeric sense of lack, we have to let some form of service flow out from us. Some form of, well, sometimes it may be forgiving. Other times it may be praying for our enemies. You know that the Master really said that it profiteth you nothing to pray for your friends, that you must pray for your enemies in order to be disciples. You would be surprised that that praying for the enemy often breaks the most stubborn claim. And you can see how that would work. You have witnessed these wars. You have watched these chaplains go off praying for the boys on our side. And then you have seen the statistics when they came back. And the statistics were about the same as the boys on the other side. And they also had chaplains praying for them. And that is all nonsense. Utter nonsense. It is as much as if we were saying to God, God, will you take care of my boys? I do not care what happens to the boys on the other side, just so long as you are taking care of my boys. Oh no, the sooner that we learn that praying for our enemy sets us free, the better it will be for all of us. In the same way, instead of entertaining human thoughts like, well, these people deserve this or these people deserve that, why not, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do? Watch the difference that that attitude makes in our minds, in our souls, and finally, in our bodies. Now, if you will remember always that at the first sign of discord or inharmony touching your consciousness, whether it pertains to your own affairs or those of someone else, with the very first moment, remember to impersonalize it, and remember that this is nothing more nor less than hypnotism producing pictures, none of which has substance, law, or reality, none of which is person, place, or thing. Never forget that the degree of your ability to impersonalize and nothingize, as we were taught in the 1959 work, this determines the degree of your healing consciousness. Because this universal claim that God is a power over error will stop your healing work in a moment, in a flash. In one way or another, you must come to the consciousness of not taking up the sword, of not resisting evil, because of your ability to abide in the realization, God. Thank you.